If you didn't hear that, what's the difference between breaking the rules and not allowing the rules to dominate you? And so this is where the calculated risk comes in. It is understanding the purpose of the rule. Why is the rule there to start with? Whatever it is that is the rule. So, rules that are there for our safety, our protection, I keep referring to traffic laws, those things are there for our safety and protection. We understand why they're there, and so we need to abide by them. They're legalities of stuff that we have to do. There's standards and ethics of all kinds of professions, that kind of thing. The rules that I'm talking about to inform really are the ones we make up in our head. We think that it is a rule that we cannot do things in a different way because it's always been done this other way before. And so we actually turn that into this unstated, unwritten rule. And there might be purpose in that too. Understanding why it is that we've done that before, how did that make us successful before, but then also calculating to say, well, this is, here we are in a new year and a new set of students, and there might be enough newness here that says we ought to look at doing things a little bit differently. So I think it is, understanding the purpose behind the rule. Is this a real or perceived rule? Are there legalities that are behind it or not? Or could it be that these are just assumed constraints that we have in our head? And you'd be surprised how much of that we think we can't do because we actually haven't seen an example of it being done. And that becomes a rule in our head, and it really isn't. And so those are the ones that I want you to just know that informs, but, not advocating anything illegal, okay? So, great. Thank you. So let's talk about the next topic. And I say it this, managing people. I could have also said leading people. And all of you are going to have opportunity to lead people. But one side of this leading people coin is play nice or be nice. Always be nice. I can't tell you how many times I was given that instruction as a little girl. Be nice. That's not nice. Nice girls don't do this. All of that kind of thing. And we actually come up with things in our heads of what the definition of nice is, and sometimes it doesn't actually serve people well. And so we might be going overboard on this topic of being nice. So if we're so focused on, well, I've got to please this person, I've got to please that person, I've got to please this person, I've got to please that, it can actually almost look like we're balancing all of these plates. And so I'm not advocating being mean. Okay, so the opposite is not being mean and brash and cutting people off, or somebody said queen bee. I'm not saying that that's the opposite of being nice, but there are times when we have to make tough decisions that might not be popular, and that is when we decide not to make the tough decision because we've got to be nice. That can be bringing those little girl behaviors with us. So for a mature woman is going to have to make some tough decisions. And so when you make tough decisions that might not be received well, that the people around you might go, oh, that's not being nice, or I don't like you anymore. Or I don't want to be with you anymore. That's going to sound just as immature as always having to be nice. But that would be, we have to not be ruled. I was trying to stay away from the word rule because we just got off of rules. But we have to not be so dominated by this idea of being nice that we can't make the mature decisions. And in roles of leadership, there are often things that we're called to do that aren't going to be very popular with people. Here's another teenager, and I included the teenage party in this one because I think this is often where the mean girl behavior comes in. It shows the opposite of being nice is, we're just going to be brutal to each other. And I was probably not only the recipient of some of that brutality, but I was also the instigator of some of it as a teenager. And it's a part of learning and growing up and doing all that kind of stuff. But the opposite side of that coin is being a really competent person who is focused on strengths and results. So what do I mean by strengths? And for that, I'm going to take a little bit of time and share with you a model that I just shared in both of the coaching classes that we taught this week to some Chi Alpha leaders and other ministry leaders. And it's all about this topic of strengths. So what do I mean by a focus on strengths? We're not all made the same, right? We all have a variety of different things that we are born with, and I'm going to draw this picture, and it's not in your handout. This just came to me this morning that I actually should show you this. So we're putting it on the flip chart. So we're all born with a set of, and I'm going to call it strengths. And I'm hijacking this word strength to mean a whole bunch of things. We're born with personality types, we were born with giftedness abilities, we're born with cognitive preferences, the way that we prefer to think and act on the way that we think. We're born with a whole slew of stuff that our Creator gave us at birth and had purpose for and intention about. And it's unique. What we have is different than everybody else on the planet. So right there, it's going to be this thing that's going to fly in the face of including and same with everybody. But this acknowledging that we're all born with a set of strengths. Unfortunately, we don't really know what those are. My kids came out naked. There were no labels, said this kid, has these strengths. And so it's this lifelong discovery process to figure out what our strengths are and what those unique things are that we were born with. And so after we're born, then we go through this process of building skills on top of strengths. And that's what all these little building blocks are that I'm drawing here. We're going to call those skills. And what I mean by skills is things that we can learn, that we learn how to do. We don't, when we're infants, we don't know how to do a whole lot. And from day one, we're learning. We're learning how to move our hands and fingers, and we learn a whole bunch of stuff. As children play, actually, they're building skill on top of their strengths. My two sons, one son who ended up becoming an engineer, spent most of his playtime taking things apart. And in fact, I can remember one boombox that actually was all over the floor. Wires, screws, plastic parts, everything. He thought it was great to take a boombox totally apart. And the other son focused on creating. It's like, what can I make with this? And glue and tape and paint and all this kind of stuff. And now he's a professional artist in mixed media, by the way. And so you can watch children at play, and it's fun. We were created to love to learn, particularly learning stuff that has to do with what we were born with, the strengths that we were born with. But then an event comes into our life, and it's called school. So there are rules, here's that word again, about, certain things that you've got to learn to become a functioning member of society. And you've got to learn this set, and it's called, you finish a grade or you graduate from something. And so you're adding skills, some of it that's built on top of strengths, some of it is built outside of the realm of your strengths. And don't be too quick to guess what those things are. We can actually make A's at classes that are outside the realm of our strengths. We can. We're good at learning. So we can please a teacher, we can make the assignments, we can make an A at it. We can also make poor grades at something that is built on top of our strengths because we don't like the teacher, because the learning style was not quite right for us or whatever. So we get into traps of thinking what is built on top of our strengths and what's outside of our strengths. But left to our own devices, after school, we get to choose how we spend our time after school. We'll revert back to learning the things that are really fun for us. Not if you're forced to do something after school, but if you get to make the choices, you'll revert back to building skill on top of your strengths. Then college comes along, and it's similar to this grade school experience in some ways because it will require us, because of the requirements for the degree program, we're going to almost always have to learn things outside the realm of our strengths, even if we chose the degree program really well. If we chose a degree program that really has a foundation of the strengths that we're born with, then that's the best situation. But that's not always the way that people choose their degree program. Sometimes they choose it because my father was a lawyer and my grandfather was a lawyer, and therefore I have to be a lawyer. And so if they do that, then they might find themselves building skill only outside the realm of their strengths, kind of starting at this edge and building out that way. And you can still make good grades at it. It's harder, but you can still make good grades at it. But then there's your life. And the best situation ever would be that you find that calling, that job, I can't even draw, okay, that would cause you to utilize skills built on top of your strengths. But that's not always the way we find jobs, right? That's not the way it's not always informed by what our strengths are and what we were born to do. For a variety of different reasons. It may just be what was available. It might be, what was in the community where we wanted to live, or where our husband was, or whatever. But the best thing that can happen is that we're utilizing skills built on top of our strengths. So if you have a role in life, a job that requires you mostly to use these skills built on top of the strengths that you were born with, you act when a challenge comes your way, then if you're in this spot, then your reaction to that challenge is, I love a good challenge. Yeah, I want to learn it. I don't even know how to do it yet, but yeah, there's a challenge coming my way. And so your answer is basically yes. I'll step up to that challenge. And there are results that come out of your life. Joy, happiness, and an ability to give back. And oh, by the way, since this is how our Creator made us, what we do in this space with these skills and this job actually glorifies our Creator. It is that, we're being what He created us to be, and therefore we're having the impact that He wanted us to have. But what if, let's just say for, speculation purposes, this extreme over here, what if your job, your calling, your what you're doing most of your waking hours requires you to utilize these skills that were built outside the realm of your strengths, outside of what you were created to do? When a challenge comes here, we just don't necessarily, be disrespectful and say, no, I'm not doing that. But a lot of times what we'll say is, I think that's somebody else's job description. Or maybe that's not the vision for our ministry. Or what will you give me if is most often what happens. I want a raise. I want more people. I want bigger budget. I want. And in that regard, the outcomes, if you're spending your life over here outside the realm of your strengths, remember, you could be making A's at all of this. I didn't say you weren't good at it. You're making A's at it. But there are outcomes. If you do this over time, then it is first starts with stress, can turn into physical illness, literally physical illness, and being a drain on the organization. And what I mean by drain is drain in attitude, drain in finances, drain in effectiveness, pulling down everybody else with you. You are a drain on the organization even if you are good at the skill set that's required to do that job, if that's not what you were created to do. So, there's one more little piece to this. Sometimes when people hear me say this, they go, well, are you saying we're self-sufficient? Absolutely not. I really believe that this is the plan, that God wants us to be reaching for jobs that require us to use skills in line with the strengths and how He created us. But where there's so much of a gap between what we already know how to do that we're going to have to depend on them daily to get there. And I call these God-sized goals. These are God-sized when it is in line with what He created us to do, but there are gaps. We can't even see our way to getting there because there's so much of a gap, and we're going to have to depend on Him daily to get there. So this is what I mean when I say focus on strengths. Focus on strengths. When you're leading people, the idea is that not only do I believe this for myself and want this for myself so that the Lord will be glorified in what I do, but I believe it for everybody else. And instead of, let me back up a couple of slides, instead of my focus being always be nice, never make any tough decisions, that I might be able to, as I stay focused on strengths and results that come from that strengths and results, if you stay focused there, there's going to come a day when you're going to have to deliver some tough news. You know, this is not something that you're cut out to do. Let's together work to find what it is that you're cut out to do, because I believe with all my heart there is purpose in your life and that you have a set of strengths that are unique to you, and there's a role for you in the kingdom. And let's together go find out what that is, but the results that are happening right now is not it. And that's a tough thing to say. You cannot hold, this got to please everybody, and that tough conversation at the same time. Doesn't mean you have to be mean in the way you say it. I think it can really communicate love. Really communicates love. And this worship of the God who created us all, that says there's a purpose and a plan for all of us, and we ought to be all on that path to find it. And never settle for less. We're children of the King. We're not settling. We're going to be, and I believe the very first time that I drew this chart, this little graphic, was when I was coaching a gentleman who had just been promoted to his first executive position at IBM. And we were in a courtyard of a cafeteria. And I had been thinking some of these thoughts, but hadn't ever really put them on paper. But when we were having this coaching session, I said, there's a concept that I really wish you could get that's really informing your life right now. And so I just whipped out a napkin, drew it on the napkin. And it was this. And then after I drew this, I said, where are you right now? And he took the pen out of my hand, and he drew a little stick figure right here. And he said, Jana, I'm on this ledge about to fall off. And he just got a promotion. Wouldn't you think your first executive promotion at IBM, for goodness sakes, would be just the highlight or pinnacle of your life? And he said, I'm on this ledge about to fall off. And I'm afraid for my family about the stress and physical illness that you're talking about here. And so I said, okay, well, what do you want to do about that? And I'm thinking, here, come, in my mind, I'm going, don't you want to be over here? But I didn't say any of that. I just said, where do you want to be? And he said, I want to be over here, but I can't. And it turned out that the reason why he felt like he couldn't was because he was committed to a mortgage that required him to have a salary that was over here. And I thought that was probably one of the saddest things I'd ever heard, but a lot of people in the last 18 years that I've been coaching have said the same things, that there's financial commitments that they have made that force them to keep learning and making an A at it, but never really with any regard as to what they were created to do, and then get to this point, and this is their plight. And so there is a positive end to this particular story. He actually, through a result of coaching and 4 years of intentionality, actually, he said it. He said, I'm going to stand up and just face that direction. I'm going to get up off of this ledge, and I'm going to face the zone, and then I'm going to start, chipping away at him. It took him 4 years, but he ended up leaving IBM, becoming an executive leader of another company that was this for him. And I think this is when we glorify the Lord the most. But I think I also had the easiest time of drawing this on the napkin for him because it was my life. It wasn't just his life that I was listening to, because I actually, in software engineering and leading software engineering teams for years and years and years, I had gotten myself, I could do it, I was good at it, but I got myself over there. And me too. I didn't think I could fix it because of the mortgage that we had. We have a very large home. It had 3 of everything. We had 3 dining areas, 3 fireplaces, 3 living areas, way too much for a family of 4. And so I went home and I showed this to my husband, and I said, this is us. This is me. This young man said it was him, but this is me. And I believe God is calling me to better than that, to more than that, to be over here. So what we did was we sold that big house, and we used the proceeds of that sale to start my coaching business, and I left IBM. And we moved, us and 2 teenage boys, into a 1,400 square foot apartment, to which they said, what about my stuff? And I went, we're going to work on that too. And it was a time of drawing our family closer to each other, literally. We only had one place to eat. We only had one place to sit. We only had, in 1,400 square feet, we got close. And but it was my process of moving back here. And so I know how easy it is to lose focus on strengths and results and the tough things that are involved in doing that. So not everybody's going to be pleased with that. Sometimes it's not your children. Sometimes not your family members. Sometimes not your coworkers or other people that are in ministry with you may not be pleased with what you're doing. But when we stay on the path of doing what it was that God created us to do, and in love, share the tough things that we need to share, we're a more mature woman in the leadership roles that we have. So we are about to leave this topic of managing people. I'm wondering if there are any questions about anything that I've said. I love this lady. Doesn't she look like a strong leader? Yeah, that's the reason why I picked that. She doesn't look mean to me. She just looks like, I'm going to say the things that I need to say, and I'm going to focus on strength and results here. Okay. So there's this one other little thing. I'm also not advocating that, I keep saying the opposite of not always being nice is not being mean. And so what I also notice is, and I'll go back to the little boy world and the little girl world. Play nice, don't have any fights is over here. And in the little boy world, I really didn't think my children were going to live to adulthood. That, it was fun to fight. Really physical fighting. They were throwing blows and all this kind of stuff. And then, the fight's over, and 10 minutes later, they're playing video games together. and so they could get over fights really easily. They could just do it, get it all out, and then play together. Can we do that? No. It is work to figure out how to have an argument particularly with other women, and then recover from it. And so sometimes we are seen as, if we can't figure out how to have conflict, how to have healthy conflict with each other, then we avoid it at all costs. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do. There's actually, I believe, positives in hearing opposite opinions of yours. In fact, healthy leaders, really strong leaders, recruit to have the other opinion on their team. But without thinking about it, how do we recruit on our team? We recruit people who look just like us, who act just like us, who think just like us, and guess what? When we do that, we actually set ourselves up for all of us to have the same blind spots. And we're only going to have this one set of strengths instead of bringing everybody else around us that might think a different way, see things from another perspective, have totally different ideas. That's the strongest team that you could put together. But I'm telling you, it'll create conflict. As soon as you start reaching out to have all kinds of differences intentionally on your team, there will be conflict. And so you just need to anticipate that that's going to be the case. So instead of avoiding it, why don't we just figure out how to deal with it? Why don't we just figure out? And so I believe what you do is, and it was incredibly hard to find this photo, by the way. But the reason why I selected this one is because they have the gloves on and they're going to express their opinions and duke it out, but then the gloves are going to come off. And it's that, we're going to learn how to fight fair. So what are the rules of fighting fair? I'm going to hear all of the opinions and get them all out on the table. I want to hear what you're thinking. I'm going to be able to share what I'm thinking. If there are 3 of us or 4 of us or however many of us in the room, we're going to hear all of that, even if they're opposing opinions, and let everybody make their case. And even if we have strong opinions about things and are passionate about it and want to make the case, really strongly, then make the case, but respect the other person when we're listening to their opinion and look for the good in what they're coming up with, and then collaborate on and this is where we as women collaborate better than men. That inclusiveness ends up being a benefit. So let's take your idea, let's take my idea, let's make an even better idea out of the piece parts of all of that. And if there's something that we end up having to agree to disagree on, we'll just say that. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. And then we take the gloves off and go to lunch. So, or do something else that is, so you don't have to connect that I've had a disagreement with someone, so now I can't work with them. Or I've had a disagreement with someone, and so now they're not my friends or my partners in ministry or my, whatever. Just because they have a different opinion than me doesn't rule them out as to being a part of a team. It's work. It is work to adopt this kind of a mindset, and it's worth it because then that gives us the strongest answer to whatever it is that we need to do going forward. So what would be, here's a question you can ask yourself. So what's the benefit of conflict? Unless, that might be the toughest part right there, is thinking that there are benefits to conflict. So that could be the first little bit of what you want to, embrace, is that there are benefits to conflict. Just think about it. What if everybody on the planet only knew what you know and nothing else? Only had your perspective and no other perspective. If you're thinking that would be a wonderful world, we need to have a talk. There would be a lot of blind spots there. And that's the beauty of adding variety to your teams, is that you're going to get a lot of different perspectives and be a lot stronger in the long run, but it's going to produce conflict. So what are the rules that you want to have for fair fighting? And you want to develop that. I see that we're having a conflict. In fact, I see the emotions that are coming out in this conflict. Conflict is not a bad thing, but we just want to be fair about it. And the last thing we want to do is disrespect each other or to cut each other down. That would be against Scripture. Even in conflict, we can build each other up. So, and then what are the strengths, showing up again, of the people in your organization that could lead to this? So we're about to head into the last one of the top 4 things that I mentioned are little girl behaviors that tend to show up in our lives as mature women. So the negative side of this coin, proving yourself, is we tend to think that our work should stand alone. The fact that I am good at what I do should be all that's required, and that can trip you up. It is like, I love this quote. If life were one long grade school, women would be undisputed leaders in the world. Because we're like, I'm making an A. It's back to that thing that I was talking about. I was very focused on what is the making an A in my spiritual life of following Jesus. If that's how things worked, and all we have to do is figure out the rules and then take the test and get an A on the test, and we're done, and everybody should just know that I'm good at what I do, that actually doesn't serve us very well. So the other side of it is this competency that we talked about with one of the questions that was asked, how do you win respect? The way that you win respect is through competency, recognized competency. And then it's not just being good at what you do, but it's also communicating what it is you do and why it is that you do what you do. Like this lady. I like this one too. She looks like someone who is, enjoying what she does and is focused on what she was called to do and being really good at it. But she's not leaving it to anybody's assumptions as to what it is that she does. I was at, where was I? University of Virginia. I gave this keynote on Lead Like a Woman 11 times during the course of that week. There was this one particular woman, this is a story that I want to tell, who was, she may have been an intern. She stood up and she said, I work really hard to be good at what I do. I just think everybody should notice. And it's not fair that they don't. And I just went, what a shame that, if you are really competent at what you do, what is the problem with telling people? And we had that conversation in front of the whole room. And she said, well, I've always been taught not to think more highly of myself, not to be arrogant, not to be, boastful about who I am, and that is very unattractive for a woman to be doing that. So I should just be good at what I do and not be talking about it, to other people. And so we had a very lively discussion about that. What is the distinction between communicating who you are and what you can do and how you can contribute and how passionate you are about the kingdom and the work that you do for the kingdom without being boastful? How do you actually do that? And the bottom line was how to have this fierce humility that says, I'm a learner, I am trying. It's actually, fierce humility is really well documented in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. He talks about that in fierce humility, you are focused on results, focused on helping everybody around you be successful. But in order to do that, you have to communicate what your mission is and who you are and how you can contribute to that. You can't leave that out. But the humble part is he said that Jim Collins said that all of the executives that were great examples of having fierce humility were people who would, when there was success, would always talk about how their team got them to success. And when there was failure, they would always talk about the mistakes that they had personally made. And I think that's a really good guidance for us to say we're not going to not communicate what God has called us to do and what we can do and what our competencies are and how we can contribute to the kingdom. We're just not going to keep that silent. And at the same time, we're going to have this humility that says, when we as a team are successful, I'm going to celebrate everybody else on the team. And when we as a team are not successful, I'm going to own up to what my part was in not getting us successful and figure out how to learn from it and move forward. And that the combo of that over the period of a lifelong of ministry actually can serve you really well without you sitting back wondering why nobody's noticing how good, what it is that you can do to contribute, and wondering why you're not getting the positions or the projects or the promotions or the opportunities for a greater scope of influence in your ministry. And it might be because you're just not communicating what it is that you can do and how you can contribute your giftedness. So to get there, you'd have to understand, so what is the impact that I'm having? And how can I articulate that message? What is the main message that I want to share about my work? And practice that. That was the reason why I chose that particular question on your handout. Was to say, it might require some journaling, it might require some thought to figure out how to say those things and say them in a humble way, and that wouldn't come across boastful. And then figure out, who do you want to communicate this to? What would be the most strategic place? It's not like you're going to put a sandwich board on you. You might not even post it on Facebook, or you might not tweet about it every single day. So what are the strategic places that this communication needs to happen, and who are the strategic people that this communication needs to happen with, in order for you to be able to have the opportunities that you were created to do, that that you have that giftedness in. So here's the summary of these top 4 again. Including everyone, the positive side on that is focusing on quality. Following on the rules, the positive side of that is allowing the rules to inform you and paying attention to what are those rules that maybe not be rules, they're just assumed constraints that you have in your head. Managing people, the positive side of that is understanding this whole thing about strengths and results. And then on proving yourself, what is the message that you want to communicate? What is the competency? What is it that your contribution to the kingdom is supposed to be, and how will you communicate that? Well, that is a good stopping point in terms of asking any questions about those 4 little girl behaviors that show up, because I'm gonna share with you a little bit more from other resources. Yes.
Just wanting to clarify more on the proving yourself. What's kind of that downside? Like, what are more examples of that? Because I definitely get like the bragging or like the being too much about yourself, but how else would we see that in like the workplace or ministry?
It could be, and to Crystal, it could be that like this young woman that was at University of Virginia was like, I think I should just do my job and be quiet and not tell anybody about it. And that she thought her work should stand on its own, that the work product, that all of what she was about should be that voice for her. And I was like, no, you've got to add your voice to that. So really the downside is doing your thing and being silent about it.
Okay.
And not, sharing with others how you can contribute further.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks for asking.
My question is, how do we build an environment that is conducive to healthy, constructive criticism? Like, aside from using scripture or being open to it ourselves and demonstrating that we're open to it, asking for that constructive feedback in all areas of our life, how do we convey that to, for example, like the women in our small group, or others, maybe even peers? How would you go about that?
Well, all of those things that you listed, that's a great set, a great starter set. So of things that you can do. But I think modeling the way, inviting criticism of yourself, that just says, I'm not perfect. I know I make mistakes. I'd really like for you to tell me when there are things that I don't do so well. So part of it is inviting it, to you, so that you can model the way, is that, you don't pout or, give up or stop, doing that. You're like, thanks, it's a great learning opportunity for me, and then making adjustments. And then you go back to the person who made that, gave that constructive criticism, and to calibrate, to say, okay, how's it doing now? Are we making progress? And maybe not there yet. So, continuing to invite that with yourself. Mm-hmm. And then after modeling the way, then set the stage to say, what's going to make us stronger as a team, maybe for what's going to make us stronger in growing in our faith in this small group, is that we're able to receive constructive criticism. And so let's work on this, and see how this goes. And you may do it in small ways. I have an activity that I do with groups of executives that's always mind-blowing for them. And so for a leadership team of people, I did this one time at a retreat center for a group of 6 executives. And I had them all list for their 5 peers, what is something that is just amazing contribution that each one of those 5 people bring to the team. So they had to write down the names of the other 5 people, and beside each name they had to write, this is an amazing contribution you make, amazing contribution, 1 through 5. Then I said, and in the next column, I want you to write for each person something that they're doing that is actually detracting from the effectiveness of our team. And so they write it down next to the name, something that's detracting, all 5 names. And then what we did was each person, when it was their turn, they had to just listen. And they had to listen to all 5 of their peers tell them what they did that was absolutely amazing. And their only response could be, thank you. They couldn't not say thank you. They couldn't, but they had to say thank you. And then after we went around again, and all 5 of their peers told them what's detracting from the team. And all they could say was thank you. They couldn't defend. They couldn't say, here's the justification for why you did that or whatever. But they had to just sit there and be quiet and listen to all 5 of their peers tell them what they do that detracts from the team. And almost in all cases, it was the same feedback. It was the same thing, that all 5 people around them were telling them that this is what you do that detracts from our team. And their only response that I allowed them to have was thank you. And that, there were grown men with tears in that. They were touched by the positives that they had heard, but they were also going, wow, we really haven't created an environment where constructive criticism is the norm here in this organization. From that point forward, that was in a retreat setting. From that point forward, they did that every 6 months, and I wasn't there. Yeah. So that's a suggestion that I have for teams. It might work in a small group setting as well. Okay. What do I see in you?
And if it's a one-on-one scenario, I know that we can't control people's responses and actions. We can only control how we convey it. So conveying in love, in
Right.
truth, but in love is our responsibility. But how do you respond when someone doesn't necessarily respond well to the situation, the encouragement and rebuke
Right.
sandwich? I call it a rebuke, but you know
Yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Well, and that is hard. And keep in mind that the way they're responding today might not be an indicator of how it has impacted their life. Okay? So all we see are the externals of how they chose to respond to that bit of feedback. And so it might be lashing out. It might be the only way they've ever been trained to deal with criticism. Is the only way that they know is to deny it or justify it or reject it or whatever. And sometimes with anger or even other poor behaviors, later. But we never know how it's gonna. It still might be a pivotal point in their life that the Lord will take and use to convict them and help them learn and grow, kind of thing. And so I think the best we can do is control why we're sharing this and be sure to communicate. This is why. The why I'm sharing. I'm sharing this because I love you. I'm sharing this because I'm concerned about your own growth. I'm sharing this because, whatever fill in the blank are. This is why I'm sharing this and doing it in love. But I think when that's coupled, when you share why you're sharing it, when that's coupled with you receiving and modeling the way of how to receive that feedback, those two things together, that's about the best job you could do. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Yes.
Hi. How do you go about helping somebody discover their strengths if they don't really feel like they have many, and then discerning between things that they may be really like, but they're not necessarily a strength?
Oh, good. I love that, Alyssa, right? Alyssa? So that's the most frequently asked question about strengths versus skills. So I would have been surprised if we got out of this room without somebody asking me that question. So discovering strengths, since we don't come with a label, is really hard. It's a lifelong type of activity. So we're kind of gathering clues along the way. Of what comes natural. Some of the clues of what might be a strength for people is that when you're doing the skills that are built on top of that strength, you feel more and more alive. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I got this. This is making me, I'm loving it. There's usually not tons of struggle associated with a strength. The top strengths, interestingly enough, those things that I believe that there's some small number, I don't know what it is, 2 or 3, something, small number of things that we are actually better at than most anybody on the planet. Those, we are a natural at it. And we don't have to study, we don't have to work at it, it just is there. And because of that, because we didn't have to study for it, we didn't have to do much at all, we're just really good at it. We actually think all human beings were born that way. I didn't have to work for it. Must be a part of just humanness that I didn't have to work for it, so everybody else has got it too. And it's just not true. It's not the case. And so the way that shows up is that when somebody else doesn't display that strength that we're born with, that we didn't even have to try on, and they are now not doing it, we're frustrated, and those are some of the clues as to the top strengths that we have. Look at what frustrates you the most about other people. Or have you ever said, it's just common sense? Everybody should know this. It comes with being human. Over my 18 years of coaching people, there's no such thing as common sense. There isn't. Common sense, when you get that frustrated that you think there's common sense, that everybody should just know these things, that's a clue as to part of your strength. Those things that are natural to you. And so look for those. Start paying attention. If you'll start writing down every time somebody just really irritates you on a particular topic and start looking at the pattern, there's going to be some strength in there. And so you can actually spend your whole life, you get this choice, you can spend your whole life being frustrated that everybody else doesn't have your strength. You can. You can get more and more and more bitter. And basically what you're saying when that's all you do with those things that frustrate you about other people is you're saying, I've got this strength and you don't have it, 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 you don't have it. You do that for 60 or 70 years and you'll turn into a really bitter person. The other way, the other perspective would be, I'm going to start paying attention to those things that irritate me about everybody else around me and consider that, oh, maybe I'm a natural at that. Maybe I'm being too hard on them that they don't have what I was given as a gift, and it is a gift to be a natural at something that I don't really have to work at. And instead of pointing out how many people on the earth don't have your strength, what if you spent your whole life going, I was given this gift, I'm going to give it to you, I'm going to give it to you, I'm going to give it to you. In fact, I'm going to give it to everybody that I can come in contact with for the rest of my life. There's a lot of joy that comes out of that, but there's a lot of work, and we're not taught that. This doesn't come in a class at school that teaches you what your strengths are. What comes out of school is A's, B's, C's, and D's, that kind of thing. So now, ladies, you're at the point where this is a great time in your life to be taking notes on what your particular strengths might be and make sure that they are a part of what most of your waking hours involve. So that I know that's not as easy as maybe you were hoping that I was going to say, oh, read this book or take this assessment or, that kind of stuff. It's not as easy as all that. It's a lifelong discovery, which is the reason why a lot of people walk around the planet not knowing, what their strengths are. But, the scripture tells us over and over and over and over again that we're all unique, that we have a purpose, that God has given us these gifts, and He is faithful to show us when we seek to figure out what those are. So thanks for your question.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. 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 You're welcome.